They are everywhere, on the grain, around it, under it, and there's little he can do.
Because we had such a good seasons, we were full to the brim everywhere, and we put hay in front of the sheds to hold the excess grain in, get that extra couple of loads in. When the mouse came, we thought they'd go, and they didn't, and they just bred and bred. And yeah, that's why it looks as bad as what it does.
The mice arrived around February and haven't shown any signs of leaving. Mice can give birth to a litter of up to 10 offspring every 20 days, and they can fall pregnant as soon as they've given birth. They can reach near plague proportions before farmers are even aware of a problem.
Just over it. Just, yeah, like everyone else, just the smell, the stench, you never get used to it.
But it's not just his sheds where he's got a problem. The mice have delayed him sowing this year's canola crop because it could be eaten before it has a chance to grow. There are no silos in the area for economic reasons, and grain bagged and stored outside his sheds is also not safe. So his priority is to remove all the possible food sources for the mice plague. He's selling his grain earlier than he planned, forcing him to enter the market at a lower value than he'd hoped for.
We needed to get it off in a hurry, so we had to buy a bagging machine, and we've got a lot more grain in the paddocks, and that's giving a feed source for the mice, so we need to get rid of that feed source before we sow to try and get the population down. But we're up against it, but we'll get there.
It's a race against time as the sowing season draws closer to its end, and mice try to be everywhere where there is grain, even inside machines. He's coping the best he can.
Yeah, coming home and finding them, just got to look away. Ignore, focus on the positives, I guess. Like I said, what you saw here was a perfect storm.
Further north, on Adam McRae's farm near the town of Coonamble, mice have eaten his future. Last year, when he was harvesting good crops of wheat and hay, they arrived.
We got through to harvest. We baled our hay and straw, stacked it up, and then by about February, they came marching in, and it was nearly overnight. They just arrived in big numbers, and we started baiting. We're baiting twice a week around the hay bales, the stacks of hay bales and stuff. And yeah, it wasn't too long before the damage really started to mount up. We were killing lots of mice, but it seemed for everyone that died, 10 were coming in for the funeral, and this kept going and going, and they've done a lot of damage.
As soon as the mouse plague hit, Adam buried 500 bales of hay for safekeeping. The mice destroyed the rest, about 1,500 bales. Only a few are now worth salvaging.
We're in the hundreds of thousands where we're looking at with our losses. It sort of gets you on a number of levels, I reckon. There's obviously an economic cost, but it's probably not the one that really hits you the most. I think it's, my son drove the truck, to pick up the hay. We had a big team of guys do the straw, a lot of work, and just put the icing on the cake with harvest, and the effort to get it all to where it was and stacked and tarped, and it really was an achievement.
It's not just the immediate financial impact that has farmers like Adam worried. Many across New South Wales have stored hay for when the next drought comes. Now they'll have little, if anything, in reserve to get them through. CSIRO researcher Steve Henry has been on the front lines of this recent mouse plague since it began. He's visiting affected farmers like Adam to understand what happened, assess the extent of mouse damage, talk about what they can do now, and also how they can better prepare for next time.
In one farm not far from here, we know of a haystack that contained 3,000 bales that was completely contaminated, and so the farmers were only left with the option of burning that hay. That was a $120,000 loss on one farm. One of the things we're concerned about now is the rate of overwinter survival. So if we get a high level of overwinter survival of mice, then if conditions are favourable next spring, then they'll start breeding early from a high population base, and that leads to a very rapid rate of increase.
Steve Henry says this ongoing mouse plague is a once-in-a-decade event. It's erupted across large parts of Australia. The scale of damage across New South Wales and southern Queensland is hard to quantify, but it's also occurring in parts of southern New South Wales, northwest Victoria, and even the Yorke Peninsula in South Australia. To help contain the widening outbreak, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority has approved an emergency permit to allow bait producers to double the strength of zinc phosphate bait. And if mouse populations aren't reduced over winter, the scientist warns mice could re-emerge in even greater numbers.
There's the physical cost of it, and that's devastating enough by itself, but then there's the ongoing psychological impact that it has, and you guys dealing with this every day.
Yeah.
So this is something that we've only just started looking into, but it seems like in this area of northern New South Wales, it's been quite common, for farmers who have managed to put away hay to have it seriously impacted by mice. And if you're hearing stories about single farms losing $120,000 worth of hay, on this farm, goodness knows how much they've lost.
And for Graham Jones, confronting a mouse plague on his farm is still better than enduring drought.
Oh, a lot more optimistic than what we were a year ago. Yeah, no, things were pretty down and out then. At least we've got something to sell now, and we've got hurdles to jump, but at least we've got hurdles to jump.
The term FIFO, or fly-in, fly-out worker, is synonymous with Western Australia's booming mining industry. But one mine has bucked the trend with its own residential workforce. And as Landline's Sean Murphy discovered, the Shark Bay salt mine is also unique because it operates in a World Heritage listed area.
In a matter of days, this salt will be in Malaysia being processed by some of Asia's biggest food manufacturers. But in reality, it's a journey which has already taken about 2 years. It begins about 750 kilometres north of Perth in the pristine World Heritage listed waters of Shark Bay, which are 1.5 times saltier than the open ocean. Over 12 months, about 200 million cubic metres of salt water will move through a series of condenser ponds, gradually evaporating and becoming even saltier. Shark Bay's hot, dry climate is ideal for marine solar salt mining. The lack of pollution, natural features and biology here help produce salt that is 99.7% pure.
Basically, we're taking the seawater in, and it's a never-ending process for us, so we're not actually going to run out of our resource. So as the seawater comes in, concentrates up, and as long as we've got clean seawater coming in, we can always produce our product.
Technically, this is mining, but it's more like farming. The crystalliser ponds are rotated like paddocks and are harvested every 12 months.
Yeah, we class these as our crops, basically because the salt, as it comes through, the density drops down and the crystals grow up. So we are actually growing a crop, and we're not actually mining a mineral as such as digging it up.
The Shark Bay salt mine produces about 1.3 million tonnes of salt a year, which is in high demand for food and chemical production. The mine's Japanese owner, Mitsui Corporation, has been in Australia since 1901 and helped form some of the first international consortiums to develop iron ore and coal. In the last decade alone, Mitsui has invested $16 billion in Australia, with interests as diverse as mining, power generation, construction, transport, financial services and food. But Shark Bay Salt is the only business that it actually operates.
Hi, Sean. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Wanda-san.
Shark Bay Salt's Perth-based managing director is Hidetaka Honda.
We are mainly exporting to Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and South Asian countries like Indonesia. And that is expanding. We are expanding the business to those countries so far.
Made in Australia is a high selling point in the market, but made in a World Heritage listed area is a world-leading marketing advantage. In Japan, it's also found a niche market with huge cultural significance.
Before a bout begins, sumo wrestlers will toss a handful of salt toward the ring.
In Japan, salt is sacred, and Shark Bay Salt is used to purify the sumo wrestling ring. The company says it's proud of its product, but equally proud of the business it's built in Australia.
The story that goes behind the salt brand, because it's a big story. I mean, it's an employee that does what they need to do at work, but it's also the family unit at home that's part of that success, and we're proud of that. I mean, we've got a workforce that you know, more than 50% of our employees in one of the locations at Shark Bay have been there for more than 10 years, and that says a lot.
Mitsui also owns the Onslow salt mine in the Pilbara region. It's larger and produces 67% more salt per hectare than Shark Bay. But Shark Bay is the flagship, and protecting its unique environment is paramount. With 35% of Australian bird species and abundant marine flora and fauna, Shark Bay became WA's first World Heritage region in 1991. The WA government imposes strict licensing conditions on the mine to protect Shark Bay's World Heritage status. It's the only salt mine in the world that is not allowed to discharge wastewater into the sea. Environment Manager Will Jones must conduct regular testing to ensure there's no mine water leaking into the bay.
So we're measuring at 1 metre increments to determine at what depth the higher density groundwater originating from our salt operation is meeting with the natural groundwater and the seawater that's below us. And we have to do this to make sure that the infiltration is happening effectively and we're not impacting the natural environment.
Ultimately, though, the environment is actually what makes this such a great place to make salt.
Yeah, that's right. It's the seagrass that's the foundation of it, really. So the seagrass provides the system that allows evaporation in the bay. So the water that we take here is classed as metahaline, so it's about 1.5 times saltier than the open ocean. And that's because the seagrass banks restrict the outflow of water back out to the ocean, allowing it to evaporate and concentrate. So that's really our starting point. They also act as a filter and help remove a lot of kind of marine debris and that kind of thing that gives us a good, clean starting product to make our salt with.
Salt is one of the world's oldest and most widely traded commodities. Although most people think of it as food, it's vital in the production of a wide range of goods, including plastic, alumina, pulp and paper.
We are producing salt in a very extraordinary place, and that is contributing for the Asian industries. That is a very unique and amazing opportunity for us to continue.
The outlook for all Australian salt producers is strong, with a 20 million tonne shortage predicted in Asia by 2025. And the Shark Bay operation looks uniquely placed to help meet that demand.
And that's the show for today. From everyone on the team, thanks